Hello there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Talk Music Talk with Boice. I am Boice, and this is my podcast you are listening to. Thank you so much for checking it out. If you happen to be listening for the first time, Talk Music Talk is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people connected to music from different genres and different backgrounds, both established and emerging, singers, songwriters, musicians, therapists, whoever. And on this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to Martyn Ware, musician, programmer, composer, producer, one of the pioneers of Electronica. He was a founding member of Human League, Heaven 17. He co-produced Terence Trent D'Arby's debut. Also, he produced Erasure's 94 release, I Say. He currently has a wonderful new podcast that he just started in 2020. It is called Electronically Yours, where he has interviewed electronic-based artists such as Howard Jones, Moby, Gary Numan, Thomas Dolby, Peter Hook of New Order. In our conversation, we talk about a lot. We talk about his growing up poor in Sheffield, getting into synthesizers, starting Human League in Heaven 17. We talk about his band production company, BEF. Also, we talk about the intuitive nature of songwriting, how he is constantly searching for magic in music making. And of course, last but not least, we talk about Tina Turner, my favorite. If you listen to the podcast regularly, you know that already. He co-produced Let's Stay Together, which was her big comeback single. There are some buffering issues. I tried to fix most of them in this conversation. Does not take away from a great talk with Martyn Ware. Here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Martyn Ware. Enjoy. Have you had the idea to do Electronically Yours for a while?
No, what happened was the podcast came along and I was going insane with boredom. Mm-hmm. So I decided, I'd had an idea in my head for a while to do my autobiography. Yeah. So I started writing that. And that was relatively, it's still being edited, but I mean, it was a lot easier to do than I anticipated. So I started worrying about, I need to raise my profile, all that. And I thought I'd kind of fallen in love because I used to, during lockdown, do long walks in central London, and kind of fell in love with audiobooks first and then podcasts. Okay. I thought, I think I'd be quite good at that because I know a lot of people. Yeah. And I've stayed in touch with a lot of people, and people know I am. And I think a podcast between peers is interesting. Like it's a different thing to like this kind of podcast where you don't know me, but you know my work. Whereas there's a lot of people that I've interviewed that I've actually worked with, and actually produced or performed with or whatever. And I just thought that's quite an interesting dynamic. So I thought, why don't I kill two birds with one stone? It keeps me busy, stops me from going insane, and acts as a kind of de facto trailer for the autobiography, which is coming out in spring next year. So that's why I started doing it. It's a long answer, but hey, we've got time. Yeah, that's good. What made you think okay, I'd be good at podcasting, doing interviews? I'm just awesome. Well,
listening to it, you're very likable.
I know. I don't know. The thing is, I get on with people, and I think that's that's 80% of it, to be honest. I'm an empathetic character. I always knew what. Part of my skill as a record producer and working with famous artists is getting the best out of them. And to do that, you have to become their confidant, their friend, their mentor, their chum. Because people forget that however famous people are or in the public eye or whatever, they still suffer, a lot of them, from the same insecurities. So I just think, doing something like a podcast is a natural follow on in terms of instead. It's like you're trying to get inside the heads of the listeners.
Yeah.
So I try and imagine. I'm always saying I teach students a lot, and I teach MA in songwriting and production and whatever. I'm always telling songwriters, imagine that you are delivering a message directly to one person.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then it's like multiples of one person. It's not like this big bland crowd of people. Individual people. So you've got to try and connect in a significant way with emotionally, particularly with one person at a time. It just so happens we have this technology which allows us to do it to many people simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I think. So I try and keep it personable and honest, and I try and make it as insightful as possible.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it may on the surface just seem to be something pleasant to listen to. It passes a little bit of time on while you're exercising or doing whatever you're doing, riding in your car or whatever. But at the end of it, even if you don't realise it, you'll have learned something.
Yeah.
And had maybe a little bit of an insight into a different world. And I think that's the secret of podcasting.
What do you think you've learned, like in the past year of doing the podcast, from talking to people?
What have I learned? It's a good question. I've learned a lot about people. Because even though, as a record producer, you work with people. And oftentimes you're under such time and financial pressure that you have to kind of fast track all the processes about becoming a friend and a confidant and a mentor and all that. You have to make it happen quick because there's money on the line and time on the line, and they've got a schedule, you've got a schedule, and and you don't really very often get a chance to dig deep into what makes them tick. And so what I've learned is a lot about the people that I've interviewed, but a lot about me in the process. And it's kind of like a reflective process. You're asking, the process of asking significant questions to people is, in that process, you are kind of identifying what interests you as an individual. So, oh God, this is terribly like LA kind of. I think I've grown. I think I've grown as a person, but I am one of those people who just feels like I never stop educating myself. I'm an autodidact, and I love learning. I never stop going to galleries or libraries or reading books, listening to audio books, podcasts, people's opinions, people's attitudes. And this enables you to create a worldview which is unique to oneself.
Okay.
And I find that the most interesting thing that I've learned, really, I suppose. I no longer listen to TV news or radio news or any bullshit newspaper news. I don't want to know other people's opinions. I can form my own opinions. And to do that, I need access to the purest motivations of humans on this planet, and also a certain amount of information off the internet in its basic form. People are too willing to relinquish their own opinions, in an effort to fit in with whatever this world is now. And I've always been reasonably opinionated, but I want to make sure that I'm using that knowledge to help people in some way.
Okay. Have you always been like that, where you're just constantly in a state of learning and bringing on new things?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up, I didn't have, we were poor.
Yeah.
I mean, properly poor. We had a four-room terraced house. Outside toilet, no bathroom.
Okay.
I mean, there's proper, growing up in Sheffield, which is an industrial city like Pittsburgh, I suppose, in America, and And we had no books. And my biggest treat was going to the library every week and educating myself. So I suppose it just carried on from there.
Did you see? Were you looking for a way out of there? Was that like a thought, like one day, or how do I do that?
No, I mean I love my home city. It was a time of financial difficulty because there was a kind of reconfiguring of the economy at that time. A lot of factories had closed down. I was never going to work in a steelworks. I was never going to do that shit. Yeah. But I look back on it now. There was pretty much full employment thinking about it then. So, but the problem was there wasn't much in the way of infrastructure. Like there weren't a lot of clubs. There weren't a lot of things to do. There was big bands would come and play the big venue in town. But there were, the kind of, shall we say, the hospitality sector didn't really exist in those days. So you had to make your own fun, and so it was very much you're in the gutter looking at the stars, and that was a big motivating factor in. It didn't come under the umbrella of ambition.
Okay,
it was just more under the umbrella of self-fulfillment in an environment where there was limited stimulation, right? So, in other words, the acquiring of knowledge, the acquiring of skills, was just as important, more important than getting a job, for instance, or living, so you could. You get enough money together for a deposit on a house and then get a mortgage and have kids. That wasn't on the agenda. It was all about fulfilling one's. When I say one's, I'm not talking just about me. It was like a lot of my friends at that time felt the same way. It's like because of the location where we were, we had a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of intelligence, a lot of talent in there as well, but not enough infrastructure. Okay. So to get out and do something that was significant, you had to move to London, really. And that's what I ended up doing in 1981. Okay. Nowadays, it'd be different because of the internet, I think. But
when did the music start for you? And was the music part of that infrastructure and like moving out of stuff?
Yes, it was, but just going back, I mean, I was the youngest of 4 in my family, and my eldest sister was 20 years older than me. Okay. Right. So, and then my other sister was 10 years older than me. They had a huge record collection. Yeah. They loved music, and so I grew up with kind of a lot of kind of pop and soul and Motown and Beatles and Rolling Stones. All that was going on. We didn't have any books, but we had a record player and lots of records. So that was my joy, And then I realised when I went to school, you get to play a recorder or some bullshit, or go in the choir, and I realised that I had a musical ear. Yeah. I could reproduce things by listening to melodies. I could play them.
Okay. On a keyboard? Is this keyboard?
Keyboard, not so much at that point. More, we didn't have a keyboard in the house or anything. It's only really when I moved to this kind of youth drama project a bit later on called Meat Whistle that it was like a bunch of people, all kind of outsiders, really. Mm-hmm. Some of them had musical instruments who started getting interested in not thinking you'd ever be in a band, but just messing around, really. But people had keyboards and some had guitars, and I tried playing a guitar and it hurt my fingers, so I didn't do that anymore. So I bought a stylophone instead. Yeah. And I thought I was Eno. And then, of course, when the kind of diffusion range of the cheaper kind of mass market versions of synths started coming out in the mid to late 70s, it coincided with my kind of musical blossoming. We could afford on hire purchase to buy, basic synths and not so basic synths. And then it started feeling a bit realer then. It was like we were doing something that was artistically valid, but we still had no idea that we would ever be in or make records. And it's only when punk came along that we realised we can't be any worse than a lot of those bands.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we started taking it a bit more seriously. And we commandeered an old engineering shop where they used to finish cutlery and stuff, and it was empty, and it was like you could get it for really cheap rents. As a rehearsal room, we made a little studio, and we bought a tape machine. We watched. I remember reading an article in one of the music papers by Eno again, who said, "Oh, rock and roll is dead. All you need now is a reel-to-reel tape recorder, a microphone, and a synthesizer, and a voice."
And you got that.
We took him at his word, know. And that's what started. And it was his encouragement, really, through that article and things like Bowie's Low and Heroes and those kind of albums that made us think, God, and Giorgio Moroder and those kind of I Feel Love and stuff like that, and all the German bands and stuff like that. Just thought maybe we could make some music that's a little bit like this. I mean, I know nobody will want to buy it, but at least we could do it for our own pleasure. Because once you got a recording medium, because you could record stuff and it was there forever. Yeah. Unless you recorded over it. And of course, anybody who buys a laptop now can get free software that enables them to record, or is on your phone even. But those days, that was a real step forward for us.
Yeah. How did you realize you had the skill to come with like the melodic lines and stuff like that?
I always had it. I don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
I mean, we were messing around with. Well, first of all, always loved pop music and rock music and improg rock and all that stuff. Emerson, Lake and Palmer and kind of King Crimson and all that shit was what I was listening to through the 70s. Yeah. And then, of course, the more electronic came along. So the melodic thing was pretty much me not being technically trained as a musician. When I got my first synth, it was a monophonic synth, so you could only play melodies. Yeah. Or sound effects. Yeah. You can only play one note at a time, which just goes to show. And same with a stylophone or whatever, which was my real first synthesizer. And it just goes to show the benefit of limitations. Yeah. I've always believed that it's not a positive thing to have an infinite or close to infinite variety of things as presets or samples or loops or it's just too overwhelming. You always end up narrowing it down to a smaller palette anyway. Yeah. So that's really when we start messing around with the early drum machines like the Korg Dr. Rhythm, and then making our own rhythms up with sequencers and stuff. That we were aiming, we were parroting what the records we liked and the rhythms we liked and the bass lines we liked and the blah blah blah, and not having the technical skill. I never had a music lesson in my life. I can't read or write music, but being able to hear it and then reproduce it, what you end up with is something that's de facto completely different to what you're aiming for. Like, for instance, the first record that we ever put out, Being Boiled, by the Human League, was just recorded bouncing from track to track and adding things as you went along on a 2-track tape recorder. We had no mixing desk. All we had was the Eno thing, right? So microphone, tape machine, two synths by this time, because Ian Marsh had one as well, and voices, we would also use sound effects for certain things.
Okay.
So you look at that, it's like the total cost of creating that was like about £3.50. The cost of the tape, and it was in mono, and we thought, and the inspiration for that was Parliament Funkadelic.
Okay.
So like Bernie Worrell.
Yeah.
Right, and the kind of funk. We were all soul fans and funk fans, but we had no way of playing it. Mm-hmm. Not only did we have no way, we didn't know anybody who could play it either. Because it seemed that everybody in Sheffield was into rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and we didn't want to do that, so we just had to have a go, I'm
sorry, go ahead.
That's right, go ahead.
Was Being Boiled like the first proper song, or you felt like this is something that we can actually put out?
Not really. We just thought it was the closest thing to a traditional song that we'd done, because it actually had a verse and a chorus, and didn't have a middle eight. Just had verses and choruses, and then that was it. And it only really had about 4 instruments on it, and voice, and that was it. And it was actually my friend Paul Bauer, who was in a punk rock band called 2.3, who were signed to Fast Records, an independent label in Edinburgh. And he heard it, and he said, "Oh, let me send this to Bob Last, who's the guy who ran the label." I said, "Don't be silly. Why would he be interested in this?" Because he was putting out punk bands, right? And so I said, he said, "Just do me a cassette of it." All right. I said, "All right, well, I'll do a cassette." We've got this other song as well. I'll put that on as well, called Circus of Death. Yeah. So he said, "Well, that probably isn't going to be like, that doesn't sound very commercial." But Being Boiled, there's something about it. And so anyway, we sent it up. And he loved it, so he decided to put it out on Fast Records. Added to the label. And then it got picked up by John Peel, who was the famous DJ who was like the person who championed young, new music on Radio 1. And next thing you know, he's playing it like once or twice a week. Yeah. And within 3 months, it had sold like 5,000 or 6,000 copies, which is quite a lot, by word of mouth, without any promotion. And that's when the big record companies started sniffing around.
Okay. And how did you start planning out what the first album would sound like?
Planning would probably be a bit too grand a word, I would say. There was no real planning. It's just whatever we fancied, really. It's just getting enough songs together to put an album out. Because we were so... we knew what we were doing was unique. And we had eclectic tastes. I mean, our taste musically ranged from, as I said, like Parliament Funkadelic, soul, funk, through to prog rock, through to experimental jazz, through to experimental computer music, through to German experimental rock like Amon Düül and Faust. I mean, there was no way that anybody rational would have tried to and disco as well is a big influence. So no, there isn't any way that anybody rational would have gone, "Oh, I know, let's put all these ingredients in this." It's like cooking. It's like putting a blindfold on and picking random ingredients. And we thought, well, all we can do is hope that something interesting comes out at the other end, with the unifying factor of just only using synthesizers or drum machines. That was the only rule, really.
Okay. Who came up with that rule, and what was the reasoning behind that?
We just believed that rock and roll was, guitar music was, as a creative force, was spent. Mm-hmm. Even though, it was, our record collections was full of it. We just thought the future was going to be synthesizers.
Okay.
Because of Kraftwerk and a very simplistic, naive view. But that's what led us to that.
Mm-hmm. So when something like, Being Bold is, because it wasn't successful, did it make the charts or?
It did when it was re-released.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely did. But in the first instance, nah. Mm-hmm. It got into the indie charts, but that means nothing, really.
Okay.
In terms of set.
Do you have so for the first two albums, so for Reproduction and Travelogue, where do you thinking about career-wise, or is it even a career? Just
it was
one
a career.
step at a time. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean, getting signed to Virgin Records was incredible. Mm-hmm. It was a proper label. It was the hippest label in Britain and one of the hippest in the world at that time. Mm-hmm. We were thrilled, and the first thing they did was to get us onto various tours with famous artists who had been successful. So we did 2 tours with Susie and the Banshees. We did a tour, and this was kind of moving into post-punk now, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So we did a tour with Iggy Pop around Europe. That was an education. And we did a tour with Pere Ubu, if you remember that band, which was difficult. And we did lots of one-off gigs with lots of bands, like Stranglers, and it was all kind of punk moving into post-punk. Yeah. And they thought that if the record company. And us, I think, as well, reckoned that was our audience. We were hitching our wagon to that thing. So successful rock and punk. So we did lots of live, and we were getting good live, and we had big, projections. Because we were pretty boring on stage, just 2 guys with a keyboard and one singer who was stuck to the spot, and. Until he became a rock star, pop rock star. And so we were happy. We didn't think we made it because we were still not hitting the charts, really. Mm-hmm. But we were the darlings of the kind of hip press. Okay. And we got a few breaks on TV, and things were starting to look up. And we just thought it was a matter of time before everybody realised our genius, which is the naivety of youth. Yeah. But behind the scenes, what I didn't know is they were, the record company and our management were in cahoots, trying to break the band up and get 2 bands for the price of 1. Okay. Because they knew that I would never compromise on the kind of artistic level, whereas they knew that Phil just wanted to be a pop star. Okay. And he would do anything. So they split us up, and they paid us some percentage of the next album of the Human League for us to give them, me and Ian, to give them the name. Okay. And I said, I'm happy to start something new. I'm always happy to start something new. So I'd had this idea for a while to use the name from the top 10 list in Clockwork Orange that I liked the most, the Heaven 17, as a name for a new band.
What would have looked like a compromise for you? Like making the music too pop, or that you'd be compromising? Sorry, what would have looked like compromising what you were doing?
Oh, I see. That's a good question, actually. Firstly, one of the preconditions of signing to Virgin was that they could not interfere with the creative process. Mm-hmm. So they had the right to pass comment and give us notes at the end of the process. And this was true for all the outside productions I did throughout my career as well. It's not being arrogant. It's just it interferes with the dynamic within the hermetically sealed unit. It needs to be you against the world to create something unique.
Yeah.
Right. Creativity by committee doesn't work. So, compromise would have been letting the record company determine the kind of things that we had to do. They could suggest stuff, don't have a problem with that, but otherwise it's a nightmare.
Yeah. So were you scared? I mean, even though it's exciting starting something new, was you scared about, this band that was growing and leaving that and starting something new?
I was upset because I felt betrayed by Phil. I wasn't. No, not scared. Isn't the right word. I'm not an adrenaline junkie at all. I regard anything in the real world as dangerous or potentially dangerous. Rock climbing, jumping out of an aeroplane. I ain't gonna do that shit. I'm just not gonna do it. So, because I think I think the world is a dangerous enough place on a lot of different levels. Yeah. But having said that, I'm pretty fearless when it comes to creative things, because I believe, and I always have done intuitively before I could kind of rationalise it like I do now, that unless you have the guts to do something, not be worried about the outcome, then in all likelihood, it's not going to be exceptional.
Yeah. And
it doesn't always work, by the way. I'm not saying, anything that emerges from the Godhead. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying you have to believe in yourself first. You have to believe in your own intuition about what's good and bad. Because, to be honest, if it's bad, you're better off knowing. Earlier in your career, and then you're not wasting your time flogging a dead horse, and that's how I've always approached everything I've done creatively. I'm close to fearless when it comes to trying new stuff out.
Okay. How was Heaven 17 going to be different than Human League?
Oh, well, first of all, we decided to abandon the synthesizers only rule, and that's, as a template, is a massive difference. So we got John Wilson in to play bass and guitar, and at the same time, I was making the British Electric Foundation album, which was like a kind of calling card for my future production career. So it's like, this is what if I was starting my version of Motown, this is what the house sound would be. Okay. So it's like a combination of real instruments and electronic music merged together. And that included things like string sections and horns and all the toys that I wanted to play with all the way along in my songwriting suddenly were available. And I wasn't. That's another thing that I think I'd like to say I was fearless about, which is that some people might have thought, "Oh God, I'm going to lose my vibe. I'm going to lose what makes me tick by changing the rules so drastically." Yeah. I just didn't have that. It never occurred to me. I just thought, this seems like an appropriate time to go for the jugular in terms of traditional pop production. By that time, I think we all believed, not just me, but the whole original Human League believed that we could actually write decent songs that deserved to be hits. Yeah. That's what the kind of apprenticeship of the first two albums did for me, confidence-wise, and skill-wise. Actually, to be honest, we found a lot of stuff out. I'm not reading manuscripts. This is like I'm listening to the songs. What is it that makes those songs tick? It's not just the instruments and what they're playing. It's like, where is the magic in those songs, and how can I translate it into electronic form? And that's like going to university for song arrangement, right?
What do you think makes a good song? What makes a good song tick?
That's a very big question.
How do you know when you got it right?
Well, as I say, largely it's a kind of intuition thing, I think. Mm-hmm. But there are, I mean, because I teach this stuff now, I've had to rationalize it. So, everybody knows, or most people know. They probably never thought about it, but they intuitively understand the nature of song structure. I mean, you know, anybody in the street who likes pop music would understand what a chorus is or a verse, I think. Yeah. You might not understand the more subtle stuff like pre-choruses and extended outros, you know, but they know the basic building blocks. And that's kind of emerged from early 20th century songwriting and rhythm and blues and jazz, and before that, you know, lieder and everything. So it's like, and even fugal form and stuff, all sorts of stuff went into that. And so I think people intuitively know what feels right. It's a bit like you're reading a book. It's not comfortable reading a book like Ulysses, which is just blocks of text that go down, and there's no breaks, and there's no structure, and there's no... Do you know what I mean? That's not a comfortable experience, but they know that things they feel familiar with, like chapters and sections, and So I think it's just an intuitive thing. If you love music, if you love pop music, if you listen enough to it, you will pick up that stuff. And of course, you have to understand that intuitive thing to know, and then you can feel when you're breaking or bending the rules as well.
Yeah. It's more challenging to tell the difference between, like, if you're producing someone as opposed to your own stuff, your own music?
That's a good question. No, not really. It's the same paradigm for me, except I regard myself as being at the service of the artist. Okay. It's an important distinction I make personally as a producer. I regard myself as being at this, even though I'm being paid by the record company, I regard myself as being in the service of the art and the artist, because that's how the record company is going to make their money back. That little Venn diagram there, it intersects, but it's not on top of each other, right? So that's why I think it's really precious to create a sense of us against the world thing. And the other thing is, what I try and explain to people, not just people I produce, but my students and anybody else who will listen to me, is what I've realized recently, and I knew intuitively right from the start, is I'm constantly searching for magic in an arrangement, in a performance, in the way that something accidentally happens in a recording process, in a confluence of different elements that accidentally create this moment of magic in a song. There's always a point when you're recording in a multi-track fashion. If you're building an arrangement up, there's I don't mean traditional recording where you've got a band in the studio, everybody's mic'd up and everybody sings at the same time. It's a different thing. But if you're building an arrangement up, there's always a point when you're recording where it's like this kind of, and if I could bottle it, it's like, you can't bottle it, but there's always a point where I intuitively know, and I say to myself, now it sounds like a record, as opposed to a piece of music. Okay. There's a big difference between those two things. And I'm always very consciously aiming everything that I do at the general public. I am not even slightly interested in aiming my music at a particular section of the public. I am a populist in the broadest sense of the word. I regard myself as having more in common with people who paint murals rather than people who paint fine oil paintings.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I regard what I do as people's art for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for something like BEF, does that fit into having these different artists sing cover songs as opposed to writing original music for them?
I just became fascinated with forcing a reinterpretation of meaning of songs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an interesting process. I think that's where you get the best out of a cover version. And I think a little bit of it originally was about lacking the confidence to write for another person. Mm-hmm. I've never wanted to be a songwriter, like Diane Warren or something, or who writes just hundreds of songs a year, and maybe 10 of them will do really well, and that's your career. I don't even particularly. I was asked to we were asked to write songs for Tina Turner's first album, Private Dancer. Yeah. And we turned that down. We said, look, we'll do you a couple of cover versions if that's of any interest to you. Yeah. And I was proved to be right, because Let's Stay Together was her breakthrough hit unexpectedly. So I'm just so in awe of great songwriting. And part of me believes that I can never really get to that level. Okay. I can never be Jimmy Webb, who's my all-time favourite songwriter. Mm-hmm. I can't. No, I wouldn't want to be him, but I mean, I can't. Yeah. I can't get it. I understand his process. I've listened to him talk. I've been to his concerts, and I just love the way. I'm just in awe of his talent, Mm-hmm. And I think there are a lot of songwriters like that. That from time to time, me, and the people I've been writing with, generally Heaven 17 or Human League, have touched on something that is, gets close. Yeah. But I could never make that. I don't think. I've struggled to make that. I can't repeat the formula. Mm-hmm. In fact, it feels wrong to try and repeat the formula. It's a bit, and this sounds terribly pretentious, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a bit like Van Gogh saying, or painting Starry Night. Yeah. Right? And then his agent going, what we need is more Starry Nights.
In every color.
And you've got to keep going forever, because we can sell that shit forever, right? Yeah. And it's like, I don't feel comfortable doing that sort of stuff. And funnily enough, I used to look at kind of the great Motown acts, and they really used to do that. I mean, like, I'm a massive fan of the Temptations, for instance. And if they had a hit of a particular thing, they would sometimes bring out another single that sounded pretty much like it, with a few different chords and a different lead line. And I'm going, no. Or the Four Tops, and I just never liked that. I never liked that kind of. That's why I never really liked Stock Aitken and Waterman that much, because it was a formula. Mm-hmm. And I know it works, and individually the songs are not my taste, but people like them. Yeah. But nevertheless, no, not for me, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So I would rather. I have this kind of automatic, or orneriness, I'd call it, which I get itchy. It's like if something's successful, I feel like, okay, I've got to try something else now. Just, I can't help it. It's like, for instance, Temptation was a massive hit in a lot of territories around the world. If the record company come, we need another Temptation. Come on, just write another one on Temptation. I couldn't have done it. And anyway, I think, but on the plus side of that, I think it's made the stuff we do more interesting over time.
Okay.
because there's a wider variety of work.
Yeah.
And it makes me happier, you know.
Yeah. So going back to with BF and Tina, how did you connect with Tina, and like when you were going to choose artists and that she would be a part of that?
Well, it's like fate. This is
and she did Ball of Confusion, for people who don't know.
Yeah. But that was originally James Brown who did that.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So James had agreed to do it. And we got our flights booked to Atlanta. We were going to record him over there in his studio. And then, like, less than 24 hours before the flight, his lawyers rang up and said, you know, James wants... It's a bit easy to tell this, but basically everyone on the album was getting 3 points on their track. Yeah. Pro rata, right? And so his lawyers rang up and said, James wants 3 points on everybody's track. Okay. Because I'm James Brown. Yeah. I'm Mr. Brown. Right? And said to his lawyers, we can't do that. We couldn't do it because we'd signed a favoured nations clause with all the other artists. So if anybody, they were all entitled to it. We'd have been bankrupt. It was impossible. So we were so depressed. Went into the record label, talked to our A&R coordinator, and just at that, as fate would have it, at that moment in time, one of the directors of Virgin came in. Ken Berry, who was the financial controller, who happened to be a friend of Tina Turner. He overheard the conversation and he said, what about Tina Turner? And I'd just been to see her the week before. Okay. And I'd not thought about it. I went to see her do the Proud Mary show, you know, the thing. She was playing in London. I loved her. And I've always loved her. I always loved River Deep Mountain High and all that. I said, that's a great idea. And the next thing I know, within a week, we're flying out to Los Angeles to meet her. Which is, for young lads from Sheffield, believe me, was quite something. Never been to Los Angeles, only been to America once before. And suddenly we're in Tina Turner's ranch-style, multi-level house in the Hollywood Hills, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, and she said yes, you know. So she came over with Roger to do Ball of Confusion, which I still think is a great version. Yeah. And that got released as a single, but you know, she didn't have a record label then. No. And that got released as a single, and nobody was interested. Couldn't get it on the radio. Amazing. But then they offered me, you know, to do some stuff on Private Dancer. Okay.
So what was it like working with her, like your process with, you know, you're not having traditional instruments for everything, or as the...
I mean, she's from literally the old school, where she's just a singer. I get the impression she never had. In fact, she told me she never had any interest in contributing towards the creative process from a musical point of view, or from her voice and her interpretation of whatever the song is. So she'd literally just come into the studio. So she said, "Where's the band?" I pointed at the Fairlight. Said it's in there, and she went, "I don't get it." You know, something. That's what she said later in her autobiography. It's like, I didn't understand it. So she just sang her thing. She was in and out of the studio in an hour. It was first take, you know.
Incredible.
That was she's just an incredible performer. Yeah.
Do you have to give like suggestions in terms of how? Do you have to sing differently when you have all traditional instruments as opposed to electronic?
No. Well, I'm going to give direction to Tina Turner how to sing. I don't think that's going to happen. That's like me going into the flight deck of a 747 and saying, "I'll tell you how to fly the aeroplane." No. She'd already figured out what it was going to be like, and it's just to make any difference. It could have been on an arrangement on ocarinas. It wouldn't have made any difference to Tina. She's already figured out what it means. Yeah.
And how far is that off from Private Dancer and you working on that album? 'Cause you did 1980. How far off is that from?
Oh, that was 83, I think.
Okay, and then Private Dancer was 84.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you did in 1984 and Let's Stay Together?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about the play where you were seen in the play?
Have you seen it?
Yes, I saw it 3 times. Yeah.
Oh, it's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Wonderful.
I'm not like that person at all.
Okay.
They basically conflated several characters into one to make a character, right? Yeah. So, I never dressed like that ever. B, I never had a haircut like drapes and stuff. C, I never was in the studio, and in fact, never met Terry Britton in my life.
Okay.
So that was. I never worked on Let's Stay Together. I never worked on What's Love Got to Do with It, which is in that scene. Because what they'd done is they moved Let's Stay Together as a kind of separate number earlier in the thing. So they kind of mashed it all up. And so I end up being this kind of cartoon character that's like from north of England going, it's like trick northerner.
Yeah.
Hey up, Tina. There's no band, it's all in that box over there, It's like, no.
Yeah.
They didn't ask me about it before.
Yeah.
I got invited to the opening night. I was horrified. But, the thing is, at least they get credit. So.
Yes. How did you decide upon Let's Stay Together? How was that chosen?
I'm a big soul fan, always have been. And just love that song. And I wish I'd still. I wrote a long list of 10 or 12 songs that I thought wrote and discuss, And number one, the one I really wanted was Let's Stay Together, because I just think it's a beautiful song, and I could see how it could be. I could see how the music on the original performs a certain function of framing the voice, but if you took the voice off the original track, the backing track is a bit nondescript, frankly, on the original. And I love Al Green, by the way. I've talked to him about this.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking. I'm not talking out of school. I just thought it's a classic track, but I thought I could improve on it in a more modern way.
Yeah.
And but still maintain the kind of vibe of it for a new audience. And and it worked.
Yeah.
It's almost like doing a reboot of a film.
Okay.
Where the original film was maybe done on a. Oh no! This is not making it sound very good, is it? It's a terrible metaphor, but it's a bit like you can make it, you can flesh it out. A bit.
Like a restoration. Would that be more?
The vocal, the song, I mean, I would have said in advance of it that however talented Tina is, she would have to do incredibly well to improve on or match Al Green's performance on that. Yeah. But I think she did.
Yes, I agree.
I think she matched or improved. And in fact, I think Al is extremely grateful that Tina did it and we did it. Well, he stated it on one of the DVDs that for her 60th birthday or whatever. And so I'm very proud of that track. It was, we put a lot of effort into it, and it just worked.
Yeah. Does this then lead into working with, and should I say, Sananda Maitre or Terence Trent D'Arby?
Sananda Maitre. Yeah. You can say Terence. You don't have to.
Terence. Okay.
I mean, I can't say Terence.
Okay.
I just said it, but I can't say it to him.
Yeah.
It did in a way, I suppose. Yeah, because that put me in the top division of producers. I mean, I turned down a lot of work after Tina. because I didn't want to move to America. A lot of the work was in America.
Okay.
I turned down a Rod Stewart album. I turned down a Bette Midler album because the precondition of it was having to go and live in America.
Okay.
And I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Because not just because I love my life in London and my friends and the studios I was working in here. It was as much. I've always really believed that you are what you eat in terms of the music you produce. Mm-hmm. So. I believed and still believe that if I'd have moved to America at that point, I would have been I would have been eating different digital food, and therefore what I came out with would probably have not been as interesting. Mm-hmm. Because what they really want, they didn't know what they wanted. They just knew there was a particular sound when they employed me, but they didn't understand that requires me to be surrounded by the things that make that sound.
Okay.
That I'm eating, that I'm absorbing all the time. So I'm like, before the term urban had a different meaning, I'm a genuine urban artist.
Yeah.
I have to be in a city, draw my musical energy and creative energy from that city environment. Mm-hmm. I've tried to work in residential studios. I end up. It sounds like folk music, I don't know what comes out. It's too mellow, and that's not me. Mm-hmm. There always has to be a kind of edge to what I do.
Mm-hmm. When someone like a Rod Stewart or Bette Midler comes to you, are they interested in a particular sound, or just Private Dancer was big, so I want my album to do that?
Who knows? I mean, it was their record companies who put these possibilities up. Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting. I think I'll tell you. There's a good example. I worked with Dan Hartman. Mm-hmm. Instant Replay and Living in America. He called me up, and I've always been a fan of his work. And he called me up and he said, I want to work with you as producer, Martyn, because I want that European sound.
Yeah,
and I'm going, I don't know what that is. I mean, I do what I do, and if that's what it is, then that's fine. Uh-huh. But for that to happen, you have to come to London. He came to London, and he came to the studio the first day, and he's used to the whole. He's a keyboard player himself, right? Yeah. So he's used to the whole musicianly world of session players and musicians, and that's his world because he's a producer himself. And so came to the studio. We hired the studio called Swan Yard, which was at Islington, which was a relatively new studio. It's all right. It was like mid to upper range studio. Came in, all there was my synthesizer. Yeah. And a couple of musician friends of mine, guitarist, bass player. And I think one other keyboard. And he's used to being surrounded by dozens. Yeah. It's all very technologically driven, his world, and a lot of producers in America. And he got quite angry. Okay. And said, this isn't what I signed up for. I said, calm down, Dan, it's about the music. Right, anything you want, we can hire in. You can do anything you want. If that's what makes you feel comfortable, we'll do it, From my point of view, if you want the European sound, this is how we did it. A drum machine, 2 synths. And you couldn't believe it, honestly. Yeah. He was going out. I said, look, if we need more musicians, we'll get them. Employ them. I've got a big range of people who we can get in. Do you want strings? Get strings. We've got London Philharmonic Orchestra, string players. Got the best session players in Europe are in London. A lot of them, anyway. And they'll be there at the drop of a hat. Just chill, man. And after a couple of days, I got my own back, though. Okay. I did. On the second day, he said, we decided to have some dinner, send for some dinner from a takeaway place, and he said, "I love Indian food," and I knew he came from LA.
Yeah.
So I've been to LA, and the Indian food there it's not really Indian food. I mean, it's like really the mildest curry that you get in London. You know. He said, "I really like really hot Indian food." I said, "All right, okay." So we rang up the local place and said, "Our friend says he likes the hottest version of what you do.
Yeah.
You do that. And can you send us some extra chilies just in case?" So we ordered this meal for him, and we had just the normal stuff, right? And we did say, "Are you sure you don't want, you want the hottest?" Absolutely, because it can be quite hot. He said, "I can deal with any amount." Yeah. Oh my God! I thought we were going to have to take him to hospital. It was so funny. Oh my God! And he said, "Fair enough." We told him before we turned and said that. That's because you moaned when you first turned up. But we were bonded then, right? After that, and we created nice stuff.
Yeah. So, what do you look for when you want to? You're going to produce something, produce someone. What do you look for?
I am. I don't do any speculative production. Mm-hmm. I only produce people who come to me and have an appetite. That's the way I work. I'm not interested in the American model, where a lot of producers are like a combination of scouts and programmers, producers. I don't want to do that shit, because I could spend a year, 2 years, 3, 5 years developing artists and they never get signed.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do that. I don't want to be a record label. If people are interested in me working on their stuff, they can pay me. If they're not, fine. Yeah, that's fine as well. So so it's not about me deciding. It's I can turn down stuff if I don't think it's the right quality or it doesn't have potential, which I regularly do. But it's more about who I want to work with. I mean, for instance, at the moment, in fact, today I just had one of the things this is one of the good things that's emerged from the podcast is I've either made contact with or recontacted a load of people that I've lost contact with. So, and I've never met, although I'm good friends with Mark Armand, I've never met Dave Ball, his partner, and stuff. I've always admired. And on the podcast, I said, we should meet up and,
Yeah.
And so we met up today, and we were definitely vibing on stuff, and I'm hoping we're going to be doing some stuff together we are doing some stuff together, and this is a podcast exclusive, by the way.
Thank you.
I would not announce it on my own podcast. So, we will be doing some work together, and I think it's a good match. We have similar influences. He's from the north of England, was a Northern Soul fan, and so was I. And obviously, both like electronic music.
Okay.
Reasonably good fit, so
should be a good thing. Yeah.
So, I think so.
Yeah. So, is there anything you can say about the autobiography? Is it too soon? Like, it's covering your entire career.
It's not actually finished being edited yet, so it's hard to say. Except it will be an interesting. From a structural point of view, it's going to be quite interesting. I didn't want it to be just like, okay, this is me doing this, but on the other side, on the other end of the scale, I didn't want it to be one of those autobiographies that jump around like a Christopher Nolan film, I think that irritates me as well. Yeah. What I want to do is to have different sections and keep it kind of bite-sized throughout.
Yeah,
and so it's depth, and it's got a huge kind of appendix section at the back with lots of interesting stuff and analysing albums and analysing productions and inside information and lots of stuff about the different musicians and it is a dense.
Can you repeat that? Or you just buffered?
Sorry?
Can you repeat that last line? It just buffered out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's going to be a dense piece of work in as much as it's going to have a lot of different sections. It's going to be a rich source of information, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And because that's the sort of thing I quite like reading or listening to on an audiobook. But it's going to be in bite-sized pieces so people can chew it.
Okay. Well, I look forward to reading that. And that's next year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be in spring next year. It's got to be done by April because I'm doing a book tour in April and May next year.
Okay.
So if it's not done by then, we're going to miss out.
Yeah. Cool, dude. So this was great, Martyn. I don't want to keep you any longer.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. You're a good interviewer.
Thank you.
Very good.
And I really love the show, so it's great to hear you interview all these people I grew up with. So it's very exciting to hear every episode.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, I've got a lot more in. Got Howard Jones coming up this week. That's
okay,
a good one.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, but there's lots of interesting people coming on. And I'm going to spread out into people associated, creative people associated with the artists as well.
Okay.
So, like people who make, designers and video makers. The things people who don't really get credit, but they're fascinating.
Yeah.
I find them fascinating. And I'm hoping that we're going to do a bunch of bonus episodes around that. Yeah.
Sounds good, dude. Well, thank you, Martyn.
Cool.
Yeah, it
Bye,
was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay,
Nice to meet you.
You too. There you have it, my conversation with Martyn Ware. Make sure you check out his podcast, Electronically Yours, available everywhere that you like to listen to podcasts. I will put the link in the show notes, of course. Check me out online at talkmusictalk.com for more podcast information and to stream over 200 episodes from the back catalog. You can find me on social media at This Is Boice, so check me out there. Follow me. You get to see pictures of the guests. Some special requests for you. Please subscribe to the show on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and many other places. Just search for Talk Music Talk. You can find the episodes also on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/This Is Boice. There is also a free app wherever you like to get your apps. You can just download it, and please leave a 5-star rating and or review wherever you happen to listen to your podcast. All links in the show notes, of course. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, and there will be a next time, this one's for you, Liz.